Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Watch Club. We are the monthly filmmaker interview series of the Newburyport Documentary Film Festival, and I am Program Director James Sullivan. We're brought to you, as usual, by the Ford Hall Forum, which is the longest continually operating public lecture series in the country, based right here in Boston. So we thank them, as always, for helping us bring you this programming. Don't forget to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. That helps get us our programming out to other interested audiences outside of the Newburyport area. And I am very excited today to welcome the director of Celtic City, which is the new 9-part documentary on HBO Max, which just started rolling out at the beginning of the month. New episodes every Monday. Lauren Stowell is the director of the series, and she's going to be talking with us in just a moment. First, what I'd like to do is just ask producer Steve to roll the trailer so that those of you who haven't had a chance to catch up on the series yet get a little taste of Celtic City.
The 2024 Boston Celtics are one of the greatest teams in NBA history.
We did it!
It is Banner 18.
I come to work out of respect for what people have laid here before. Red Auerbach used to say it best.
Celtic pride. That's what it's all about.
The greatest in the game, Larry Bird.
First game in Boston, player walks up to me, said, "Don't look up." And all these retired numbers, championship banners.
I just thought this was normal. And then you go to other arenas and quickly realize it's not the same.
I look at that little leprechaun, and sometimes I just want to spit in his face.
The Boston Celtics bring out the worst in everybody else.
We've got a melee here in the garden.
That was the classic. Just a classic.
Larry Bird carried the city on his back, and for a lot of people, he was going to be the savior one way or the other.
30 teams in the league, but how many got things that last forever?
The Boston Celtics have to be central to the city of Boston, and the players who play for the Celtics have to feel like Celtics.
Boston's a rough place.
The bottom line is, wasn't all ice cream and cherries. You have to tell the whole story.
Every team that's hung a banner has gone through something.
This letter was sent to the Garden, and it was a threat against Bill's life and the kids.
Len Bias, with this world in front of him, gone.
Reggie Lewis, and he said his career may be over.
They're just thinking, not again.
Paul Pierce gets stabbed multiple times, almost dies.
There are a lot of things happening outside the arena that are difficult. But the time I spent in the locker room and on the floor with my teammates was like heaven.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door, fans. Kevin McHale's not walking through that door, and Robert Parrish is not walking through that door.
This kind of bonding will never be duplicated.
The greatest thing you can accomplish is friendship.
Thank you, Boston. I love you.
They all know each other's story because it's all part of their story.
The Celtics are a way of life. They're not just a team. They're the Celtics.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lauren Stowell into the Watch Club. Hi, Lauren.
Hello. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. So, Lauren, you're based in the Hartford area. And I could just congratulations on just how well done the series is. I'm one episode past the regular Max subscribers. I've watched through 4 of them now. It's so well done, and I just want to say that it's you don't have to be a huge basketball fan to really get feel what you've done with this series. Yes, it's about basketball. It's about the city of Boston. It's about what it really is about to me, I think, is it's about excellence and chemistry. And those are the two things that the Celtics have always embodied for, 50 years of ridiculous athletic success. And you hear a lot about chemistry in sports locker rooms these days, but you didn't 50 years ago when Red Auerbach started instilling that in the Celtics. Is there something, do you feel like that? Like, what are your buzzwords for describing what the series is really about beyond just a franchise, the Celtics?
Yeah, James. I think for us, it was always people. The Celtics are about people, and just like you said, I know, a storied franchise with so much seeped in so much tradition, history, success, excellence. Those 18 banners mean so much to the city, what they represent to the fans, to the players, the families that have lived this for, almost 80 years of this franchise. But every person we interviewed, it always came back to the people. And that really was from the organization top down, from the moment we started having conversations with the Celtics. And, our first interview with Bob Cousy, it was about the people. Yeah.
It's the envy. I mean, it is the envy. I mean, I'm not just saying this as a huge Celtics fan and a Bostonian, but the franchise is the envy of every other sports franchises, I mean, just because that it's permeated with those things, right? Just a commitment level. It's so cool to see. And, multiple generations. I mean, the Jaylen Brown interviews, for instance, where he's talking about, I came here and realized this is a big deal, for me to be part of this continuum and be, sort of stepping into this, Bill Russell's shoes, for instance. Right.
Yeah. And that lineage that you're speaking to, that connection between the players through the eras and the generations was also ever present in everything that we did. The connection between, Jason Tatum and JoJo White was something that you can't.
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Pick those things up. Those are just natural connections. Joe Mazzulla going to Red Auerbach camps as a kid growing up. So it really, you can see the reverence and the respect and just the homage that so many of these younger players, what it meant to Kevin Garnett to come to Boston and understand coming from Minnesota, thinking about what that was going to be like and how he embraced the city and the city embraced him. I mean, I could go on and on, as you know.
Of course, yeah.
But we had a lot of ground that we covered and a lot of incredible people that we had the honor of sitting down with. So,
all right. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit about covering all that ground, because, first tell us a little bit about your background at ESPN. So you were Connecticut native, UConn alum, spent a decade or more at ESPN?
Yeah, I was at ESPN 16 years, and that was really the bulk of my career after college. And, I was primarily in the storytelling space, features, documentaries, for across those years. And so it was always trying to find the stories that were at the intersection of sports, American culture, race, those kind of bigger discussions, those greater lessons that we can learn from sports and teams. And that was what I spent the majority of my career. So when I started to have these conversations with Connor Shell and Bill Simmons and Words and Pictures and the incredible work that they do, the opportunity to direct a 9-part series on such a storied franchise was really, it was an honor to. Yeah.
How did the 9 parts come? Like, how was that plotted? You storyboarded it, right? I mean, like, did you know from the get-go that you were going to be doing 9 hours of this?
Yeah. So pretty early on, so Connor and Bill have been this is something Bill had been thinking about since 2020. That was something that the two of them started to discuss and think about. Aaron Cohen, an incredible writer, put together a preliminary treatment. It was always, the idea was always to go beyond the history of the Celtics, that there was a greater story of America and the history of America and the history of Boston that could be woven throughout. So the sketch of that was absolutely already there when, I was brought into the fold to direct this. When I looked at that treatment and, trying to trace the beginning, middles, and ends of all of these incredible eras. We're talking about 7 decades of history that was outlined. And yeah, it fell into 9 episodes, which is a strange number, right? But I think like as I kind of, when we really started to dig in, once the team was brought together, and we started to embark on this journey and started our really intensive research phase. First, it felt like, how do you fill 9 hours? Like, just thinking about it on the face. Once we started digging into that research phase, I can tell you, James, we were like, I don't know how we're gonna, but we need more time.
Right. We need 18 episodes, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It was absolutely, there was so much story, just unbelievable, larger than life characters too, as just, you get the opportunity to tell a story that starts with Bill Russell and Red Auerbach. Just, you could do, 3-4 hours on each of those men. Yeah. Bob Cousy and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Jaylen Brown and Tatum and John Havlicek. There's just so many iconic figures in Celtics history.
Right.
And just the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the triumph and tragedy through the years. The highs and lows were, unbelievable. What the Celtics went through in those 77 years.
And the casual fans don't necessarily know that much about the lows. Len Bias, or Reggie Lewis, that kind of stuff. Casual sports fans may vaguely know those stories, but I'm sure that those are, in the coming episodes are going to be intense. The Len Bias thing was pretty crushing, in particular. But so you just rattled off like sort of half the names on the banners, on the retired numbers banners at the Garden, and you didn't mention Larry Bird. So
I know, I realized that as soon as
it's absurd, just the number of insanely talented players have come through, and so I've always loved what Bill Russell stood for and how he carried himself. And I'm a little too young to have seen him play. I came in during the sort of Cowens years as a kid, JoJo White years. But Russell's book, Second Wind, that's his second book. Mm-hmm. That might be one of my favorite books. Yeah. I read a lot, and that might be one of my favorite books of any kind, not sports biographies, just of any kind. It's a powerful, he was just a force of nature, obviously. So you have great footage of him. I know everybody in Boston knows, what a force Red Auerbach was as a coach and a GM, but he gets a lot of love in this series that, I think that, younger generations don't necessarily, they know the players, they know the great players, but they don't necessarily know they just know his name and that he's the guy with the cigar. Right. But, that guy was, in his own way, as much a part of the whole reason why this franchise is so indelible as Russell was, right? And they worked so well together. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Red Auerbach, we knew from the very beginning, as soon as we started, this journey, how are we going to honor Red as a figure in the Celtics history, but also just, we called the first episode Founding Fathers for a reason. And, thinking about that foundation that Red laid down, and even the decisions that he and Walter Brown made in those early days that were really brave decisions, like drafting Chuck Cooper, the first Black player in the NBA in 1950, the first Black starting five. I know the 76ers would follow, but they were pioneers. The Celtics were pioneers, and Red always believed that. And, and I think it was important to us to, speak with his surviving daughters, Randy and Nancy. And I was really curious how they raised them, he raised them, I should say. And just not only seeing the memorabilia in their homes and, old cigar ashtrays and photos and his old suitcase, those things were amazing. But really it was just how they talked about how they were raised, and being able to talk with, Karen Russell about how she was raised. And, to see that these, women have a relationship today that's very genuine, that they lean on each other. I think that really showed all of us, and specifically just really spoke to me that Red and Russell's legacy continues. And I'm inspired by it. They started something that, this current team, they appreciate his name. Red Auerbach's name is on that court, but every person that I sat down with in some way, shape, or form, whether I asked the question or prompted them about Red's legacy, he was part of their journey. Whether, it was Paul Pierce talking about the first time he, heard about Red Auerbach and got to meet him. And just like it was, just this almost like a mythical story that now this person is in front of me and what that meant to him. And, as well, his relationship with Larry, and there's just, he's part of the fabric. It was over 50 years that he was ingrained in the decision-making. Sure. From Brad Stevens to obviously Danny Ainge to Brad Stevens, right. The decisions that are being made today, there's still the echoes of Red Auerbach are very much present in the Celtics organization.
So you mentioned that Aaron, the writer, created the treatment before they brought you on board to direct. I'm curious to know, like, so there's some strong female energy in some of the first episodes, right? You just mentioned, Karen Russell, is it Karen Kenyatta Russell, right? I think her name is her full name, right?
Kenyatta Russell.
And Red's daughters and like JoJo's, widow. Yeah. Was any of that your doing, like you thought,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the initial treatment was an outline of kind of, decade by decade,
eras,
kind of the story beats and some of the connections to American culture and, what was going on in the city at the time. But we had to really, in that research phase, I had to think about, and our team had to think about, like, what are the specific, where do we want to turn our camera lens? Like, who do we want to shed light on and who do we want to hear from? Some of that was out of, who is still remaining here to tell the story. I'll be honest, in the first few episodes, it was challenging. We've lost so many legends. Bob Cousy and Satch Sanders, who was drafted in 1960, those are the only two remaining members of the Celtics dynasty, 11 championships in 13 years. It's sad to think about that so many of these iconic players are no longer here to tell their story, but right. we knew that we wanted to mine the archive to bring those voices to life, and even the great rivals like Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, you can't do the film and tell this story without it. But we had the pleasure of speaking with Jerry West, before we lost him, and that's right. That was just something I was so fortunate that we were able to do, because I think those decisions of who you interview, there were really only a few Celtics who, chose not to participate, and the majority did. And we were really, really lucky and fortunate that was the case.
But also the archival interview, you found a lot of amazing archival footage that I, as a hardcore Celtics fan, and most other hardcore Celtics fans probably haven't seen before, behind the scenes interviews with Russell and with, Heinsohn and, guys from that era. One of the things that's probably going to stick with me forever when I think about this, when I finish watching the series and then years from now when I'm thinking about it or going back to watch it, is you, I think, probably made a slightly conscious choice to make sure that you got Satch Sanders' hands in the frame as often as possible. Oh my God. His hands are like 2 feet long. His fingers from fingertip. Yeah. From fingertip to the base of his palm, it's like 2 feet long. I swear,
Yes. Yeah.
You can see why the guy was good at basketball. He held the basketball probably like a baseball, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I mean, that interview was so intimate. We were in his apartment, and, it was just the way, as soon as we started talking and, Satch started telling his story, he was just so contemplative and thoughtful, and he would have these moments where he would have his head and he'd look and I mean, our cinematographer, our DP, Tom Stukish, just, I mean, he made a decision to really go wide on that wide shot and get real tight and intimate, and it did match with our other interview framings and compositions, but the lens choice on that one in particular to really capture the hands and the gestures and just his body language told a story in itself. So Satch was a great interview.
Yeah. I'm just going to take a quick moment to say that if you're watching live and want to pose a question to Lauren, by all means do. Just type it into the chat, and producer Steve will alert me to the fact that we have a question from the audience. But in the meantime, Lauren, I just mentioned Satch, obviously. So one of the other really fun parts about this series is that you have a lot of sort of like unsung all-star interview subjects that I think from, the history of the Celtics that are, obviously you have Larry and Pierce and, some huge names, Cousy. But, Charlie Scott is super fun on camera. And I know that a lot of people have been talking about getting Parrish to open up, which he never does, apparently. And, I remember that from when he was playing in the 80s. He just didn't really want to talk. And, you got a lot of moments like that sort of hit like all the right beats for Celtics fans and beyond. You were going to say Charlie Scott, right? Weren't you? I could tell.
Yeah, I thought about that because it was such a surprise, for us too. Like we knew, and Bill Simmons, our executive producer, he knew that he was like, Charlie's going to be great. You definitely. And we had obviously our interview list. We ended up interviewing almost 100 people, but our list was probably, I don't know, around like 130 initially. And we were obviously having these conversations about, who should we, how do we streamline this? And Charlie was such a nice surprise. And I think, there were just so many moments like that. Like you mentioned Parrish, Jackie McMullen was a consulting producer on this. And I honestly, I think there was a lot of built-in trust. Like obviously I had to earn people's trust. Our team had to earn trust throughout the 2 years that we were on this journey, doing these interviews and conducting these interviews. But, having the backing of the Celtics, and that was something we had to earn. I had to meet Nick Grossbeck and Rich Gotham in Boston and sit across from them at a, boardroom and talk to them about why I wanted to tell this story. And that was a really intimidating moment, but it was an important one because I think, we were able to build a relationship that was a very honest one with the Celtics. Jeff Twist, their longtime PR maven, 43 years at the time we worked with him 2 years ago on this. He was calling some of these players. I mean, he was texting Kevin McHale and vouching for me and for our showrunner, Gabe Honig, who, they had to trust us that this wasn't going to be a hit piece or that we were going to, have a gotcha moment, and that we really just generally wanted to ask honest questions and try to really portray the truth of the organizations, the up and the downs. We were very upfront about that we wanted to get into some of the more, controversial trades and, the racial dynamics of the city and how that intersected with the team. Those were all very difficult but important conversations we needed to have at the outset. And then as we conducted these interviews, I think we earned more and more trust to land at a moment with Robert Parrish where we were able to really have him open up. And that I give credit to Jackie for that relationship, and she was the reason that Robert was so open in that interview. And then subsequently in the moments that you see him in the car and we're on the way to the autograph signing and he's riding through Boston and reminiscing about his playing days. I mean, I loved that. I loved just seeing him look out the window and just, when there were fans lining, it was at Dick's Sporting Goods and there were fans lining the streets and it was him, Kevin and Larry who were going to sign some autographs. And, we were like, oh, Robert, some of these, they're all here to see you. And he's like, I don't know if that's the truth, but there may be some fans. And then someone, a little kid yells, Chief, Chief, and he waves. And it was just like such a moment, right? Like that all these years later, he could come back and even his relationship has evolved with the city and with the team. And like you said, he said it in his interview. He didn't open up to the media.
I'm aloof. He said himself to this day. I'm an aloof person. Yeah, absolutely.
And that was so great to be able to allow him that space to, as we did with so many of these great players, to reflect not just on their playing career, but on what this all means now. And I think you saw that with Robert that day.
Being, having grown up in the Boston area, and it being from Boston is complicated. I mean, like people, across the country think that there's, a story that they believe they know about Boston, which is to a very large extent true, in at least in recent history.
Yeah.
But then there are other moments that contradict that story, and the Celtics have an awful lot to do with that. You mentioned, sort of some of the landmarks in terms of race relations that the Celtics and I don't think you mentioned even that they made. Russell was the first black coach in all of professional sports, I think, right? Not just the NBA, right?
Yeah.
So how did you?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So how did you and the team incorporate those difficult, the good, the bad, and the ugly about Boston in the 60s, 70s, 80s into the Celtics story in a way? And before we came on, I was mentioning there have been a bunch of really good recent documentaries on PBS and elsewhere about those rough years in Boston.
Yeah.
How did you incorporate that stuff into the series without just sort of rehashing what some of those other documentaries have done recently in terms of Boston's history, recent history?
Yeah, I mean, there were always these organic connections that we found. And that was something that we established very early on before we did any of the interviews. And then we developed kind of, those connections through the people we interviewed, really, asking them about their experiences in Boston. What was your perception of Boston before becoming a Boston Celtic, for anyone who wasn't from the city? And we got some really interesting answers, James. I mean, from Mel Carr to, Larry Bird, everyone we asked kind of just what was this perception? And we did find that many people that we interviewed kind of talked and brought the conversation back to the images of busing in the 1970s, which, of course, we, obviously didn't, I knew about it. Obviously, I knew in other cities busing and the effects and the racial tension that it created. But I, as we began to really do a deep dive on that period of history, and, it went beyond the teams in the 70s who this resonated with. And so that was why it was important for us. That was organic. I mean, how do you tell the story of the 1974 and 1976 championships or the triple overtime thriller Game 5 in 76 without talking about the fact that 2 months prior to that, Dr. Ted Landsmark was attacked on City Hall Plaza. Fast forward 2 months later, they're having a championship parade on City Hall Plaza,
right?
Where the whole city comes together united with joy and hope and, unity. As corny as it sounds, like those were organic stories that people shared with us. Even thinking about Donnie Wahlberg, someone who is iconic when you think about celebrities in Boston who are fans of the team. He had his own experience being bussed into Roxbury. Belle Biv DeVoe, who is a Roxbury-based, group, New Edition, they had their own experience, and it was so interesting kind of to see it from the standpoint of the players, how it affected the organization, how it affected the city, but also how the Celtics were able to bring people together during that time. And that continued into the 80s, and I just thought that was a really organic thing. And I think even being able to ask someone like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum about the city, it's really interesting because they both were very aware of the perceptions of the city as being racist or unfriendly to people of color. They knew about these perceptions. However, their reality of how they experienced and moved through Boston was very different. And, Jason Tatum talks about raising his son, and buying his first house and buying his first car. And his experience is very different from, the experience of Bill Russell. And I think we obviously need to show that progress and to show that evolution. We're not sugarcoating anything by any means, but there is a lot of progress that has been made. And that is what was told to us. That's not me inferring it from my own experience. That's from the 100 interviews that we did and just talking to players of color and their family members. There's a lot of pride in the city that you know, people of color feel part of, and there's a strong Black community in Boston that, you know, Dart Adams spoke to as someone from Dorchester and growing up there, that Black Boston exists, and you may not see it in movies and film and media, but we are proud. We are proud of the Celtics. We are Celtics fans, despite what in the 80s, you know, the Lakers Celtics rivalry, how that kind of racialized. But the city is very diverse, and that was important to me, that we say it like it is. That's the truth, you know, and that is a part of the Celtics story.
I could talk to you all night, but it's game time. Celtics are on right now, or they're coming, you know, tip off in 5 minutes or whatever. So thank you so much for talking to us, Lauren. Wish you all the best with the rest of the rollout. Can't encourage people enough, whether you're, you know, a fraction of the Celtics fan that I am or not, you know, watch this series. It's so well done. So congratulations again, and look forward to seeing what you work on next. I'll just say we'll take a moment to once again thank our sponsor, Ford Hall Forum, and we'll see you next month in the Watch Club. Thanks again, Lauren.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you for having me.